everyone. Early edition Normal America Show. Hope you're all doing great. I'm home, baby. Woo! Little Ric Flair for you there. Finally home. Took next week off work. Let's do it. Let's win this election, boys and ladies. And I don't give a shit at this point. Whatever pronoun you want to be called. If you're voting for Trump, let's do it. Let's get on the board, baby. We're all garbage deep down. Deplorables, Nazis, garbage, whatever, fascist. We get it. Great to be here with you all. My fellow garbage folk. Thank you. Now, the title a bit misleading. I have not received employment in sanitation. So I'm not a garbage man. I am garbage who is a man. Like all of you, if you're not voting for Joe Biden. If you're considering a vote for Trump, you too are garbage. Don't take my word for it. Take our President of the United States. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Truly does feel like 2016, doesn't it? We're right back where we began. Trump's Hitler, Trump's a racist, all of his supporters are garbage or deplorables. 8 years later, and we're right back where we started. The Proud Pile. It's a great, look at that, Captain RB nailing it. Great. We are Proud Pile here, huh? Us garbage folk. The millions of us. Feels great. Feels great to be denigrated by my president. Isn't it wonderful? It's great to be here with you all now. A little early stream because I got some stuff planned with the family to this evening, so figured I'd get the stream out of the way. Nate with the $2 super chat says, "Sup, Rob?" Nothing. Enjoying life. Happy to be home. Looking to stream here. Spend some time with the family here later this evening. And relax. Get a good night's sleep. Getting ready for the 24-hour stream. Talked to a couple more people today. Got some more guests lined up. I think it's going to be good. Going to be a good stream. But can Rob talk for 24 hours? Yes! Yes, he can. This piece of garbage, very good at communicating all of my grievances with our establishment class. What's up, BOD? You know who's having a good day today? Tony Hinchcliffe. He's probably having a good day, isn't he? I mean, think about this. Let's say Tony's a Trump supporter. I don't know. Hell, even if he's not, even if he's apolitical. Think of how his week went. He gets invited on stage at Madison Square Garden to a big event, sort of a different type of event that he does. Probably excited about that. Then he becomes the national news story in the closing argument for the Democrats for telling a joke, much like he's told millions of in his career. So he's like, you guys can't take a joke, and he's piled on by the Harris, Biden people, and the media, etc. And then, the mere fact that he made this joke causes Joe Biden to reveal his true feelings, that Trump supporters are all garbage. In a way, if Tony Hinchcliffe never makes that joke, Biden probably doesn't call Trump supporters garbage. So talk about riding the wave of highs and lows. It's just truly amazing. What'd you miss? Joe Biden called everyone garbage? How could you have? Now, I could tell you that ultimately, I don't really take personal offense at being called garbage. I could try to give a generous reading to give the most benefit of the doubt possible to Joe Biden. But Joe Biden said that the reason he got into running for office in 2020 was Trump said Nazis were fine people. A blatant hoax. All of your Democrats, all the ones that you see me debate, that's what they said. They went along with the hoax. The media went along with the hoax. Why is it that with Democrats, we can never take things at face value? They pretend that they don't understand obvious jokes. Trump told Russia on national television to hack Hillary Clinton. They don't understand the joke. Then, of course, later, Hillary Clinton says, well, given that, Maybe Russia should look for Trump's tax returns. Maybe we should find them. Maybe they'll hack them. Did the Democrats clutch their pearls and go, oh my God, you can't do that. Ms. Clinton, you can't do that? That just called for... They were like, no, clearly she's making fun of the situation. Which she was. Nate, thanks for the $5 super chat, says, I've heard that in the news cycle, if you're the one reacting, you're the one losing. That's true most of the time. Absolutely. Trump says, go march peacefully. They're like, nah, actually, that means go be violent. Biden says Trump supporters are garbage. They're like, nah, actually, there's an apostrophe in there. And is that amazing? Pisco stream last night. I should bring up clips of it. It's absolutely, the tone deafness is absolutely astonishing. Let's just go through Pisco and some of the conversations I've had with him in the past 3 days. With the Tony Hinchcliffe joke, my criticism to him was like, you're sort of selling out, because if these jokes are that offensive, why are you willing to do a show as a co-host with someone like Destiny, who said far more offensive jokes? And he's like, well, I condemn those jokes. And one of the problems, he didn't see Republicans condemning. Not enough Republicans were condemning Tony Hinchcliffe's joke. Then the next day, when a bunch of Republicans, including Trump's team, condemned Tony Hinchcliffe's joke, he was like, see? Okay. Enigma, what are you yelling about here? Watch the video that isn't intentionally in poor audio quality. You trying to claim that it wasn't that Joe Biden said that? Anyways, we'll finish up. Then, despite the fact that they were pearl clutching over these jokes, Joe Biden comes out and says Trump supporters are garbage. What's up, fellow garbage Tash God of Fools? We're all garbage folk here today. Garbage men, garbage women, garbage they, thems. We welcome all garbage here. Thank you. Like a badge of honor. Anyways, then Pisco does a cope stream. He brings up the quote. He's got his little, so he could, his little tools so he could mark up drawn brackets. Actually, if you look at the syntax here, is a singular and blah, 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 blah. There should be an apostrophe here and good stuff. So he spends all this time coping, doing his little cope stream. And then basically a huge portion of his audience is like, but Trump supporters are garbage. Remember, Pisco was outraged because a lot of people were insulting Puerto Rico after Hinchcliffe's joke. Now we have the Democrats like, Trump supporters are garbage. But then it gets even better. His Progressive Victory friends, Econoboy and Pondering, come on his stream. And I just happen to be doing a little paperwork late through the night and clicked on it. And you wouldn't believe, like, this is how bad they are. This is how bad they are. This is how bad. He's trying to, like, Pisco's trying to be like, listen, no, that would be terrible if Biden said that Trump supporters were garbage. That'd be terrible. I don't think he said that. No, people are reading it wrong. And then instantly Econoboy and Pondering come in, and you can watch the VOD for yourself, but basically they proceed to have an hour or so discussion, a very lengthy, I don't know if it was up to an hour, discussion on, well, what percentage of Trump supporters are garbage? Imagine making yourself look so foolish that you're going to try to gaslight people. Actually, Biden didn't say what you all heard him say. Just to try to get some sort of, stop the bleeding on this story, only to have the people that co-host one of your shows come on and say, yeah, but how many Trump supporters are garbage? What percentage of them? Now, to Pisco's credit, Econoboy, I believe, puts it at about 50% of you are garbage. Much like 50% of you were deplorable. Real smart, Econoboy. Pondering, not sure if he'd use the word garbage, but clearly there's something unethical about voting for Trump and many of the people that are voting at Trump. So not sure if we'd use the word garbage. It might be too dehumanizing. And Pisco's like, Yeah, I don't think I'd say garbage, but I can see where you guys are coming from. I'll have to really think about it. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And then, of course, you have other characters like Destiny and others like, of course, Trump supporters are garbage. There you have it. They can't make up their minds. No, that's absurd. Biden and the Democrats would never say that about their opponents. They wouldn't. It's all a misunderstanding versus, of course he said it and it's great because they are garbage. There you go. I have no idea how this election will go at the end of the day. We shall see. But if Trump wins narrowly, there is a solid chance that the people like Pisco, not him, me and Pisco and Conaboy and, all the people in this space, we're not going to move the needle nationally. But the people like him that were clutching their pearls about Tony Hinchcliffe may have cost Biden the election. How hilarious would that be? That all their pearl clutching, oh my God, a comedian told a defensive joke. Oh, that proves how offensive the entire Republican Party is. Get out and vote against them. Oh, cool. The president of your party called all Trump supporters garbage. I don't think I have a debate lined up. If someone calls in, we'll do it. Then someone sent me a clip. Pisco called me a snake. It's just hilarious. They can't even make up their minds. But Kamala Harris condemned it. No, she didn't. Trump's team put out a statement that was like, we don't agree with the rhetoric that Tony Hinchcliffe used. That doesn't represent our values. Kamala Harris didn't say, yeah, what Biden said was terrible. She didn't say that. She said, oh, Biden's clarified his comments. But I wouldn't say that Trump supporters are garbage. That's not what I do. That's not condemning. That's making excuses for Biden. But they're okay with it. And then my other favorite, but Rob, back in 2022, someone said Ron DeSantis was evil for sending migrants to Martha's Vineyard, and you respond to them, what's evil is the lefties. You lefties are evil and garbage that pretend to care about these migrants and then can't wait to kick them out of your own neighborhood. Sue me. Yeah, I said that. I think that's a very small percentage of the lefties and of Democratic voters. Most Democratic voters are just normal people. But certainly there are those that take to places like X and say that it's evil and inhumane and grandstand about caring about people like migrants and then make excuses when those migrants are sent to left-wing areas and those areas treat these migrants like shit and send them on their way. Yeah, screw those people. Cool. What's that have to do with the president of the Democratic Party? Calling all Trump supporters garbage? I saw Counterpoints was like, oh, Trump supporters clutching their pearls and blah, blah, blah. Spare me, Mr. Progressive Victory Pack. Spare me. How's that left-wing money treating you? Mr. I'm a conservative getting paid by progressives. Nice. The whole point is, if it's just a debate about, if it's an election about issues and about policies, Trump wins, hands down. Cool. But it's never been that with Trump, has it? It's always been, but what'd he say? He said fine people. He said drink bleach, blah, 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 blah. He's a Nazi. He's a Hitler. He's divisive. And you can always count on people like Counterpoints to then when our side goes, oh, let's see what the president of your side has to say. He's like, oh, please, that's pearl clutching. Now I'm not going to spend much more time other than to say, welcome my fellow garbage people. Happy to be here. And I'm glad that you could join the heap with me. There's another topic that I wanted to talk about briefly. It's funny when there are people that you respect in different ways that end up conflicting with each other. So, recently there's been a little bit of a spat between Mike Cernovich and Andrew Wilson from The Crucible. Now, obviously, I'm closer to Andrew Wilson, but I respect Mike Cernovich. He's someone that I listen to a lot. And now I saw Cernovich, he was sort of going after Eric Weinstein, much deserved. And he's also going after, like, I don't know, red pill people, Dave Portnoy type people, people that are saying to repeal the 19th. Tactically, he's doing something that I'm not. But I think directionally, he's absolutely correct. I don't have time for that nonsense right now. I'm going to be quite clear with you. I think this election's important enough that I'm willing to take allies from anywhere. And I mean anywhere. When it comes to voting, I'm not going to join their movement. Guy who's super pro-union, that despise most other Republicans, he wants to vote for Trump? Great. No problem. Inner city black person that thinks that the country's ridden with systemic racism, he wants to vote for Trump? Great. Fine. Porn star lady wants to vote for Trump? Good. Transgender activist wants to vote for Trump? Great. I don't care. I'm not trying to be divisive. It's why one of the big things... Thank you, Federer, for the cheer for 500. I appreciate it, man. One of the things that I've avoided doing is having big infights, particularly with the group that I think I would be most likely to infight with, are Republicans that aren't voting for Trump. Like the DeSantis people that are like basically never again Trumpers. But I'm not doing it. I don't have the influence of many of these people that you see on the left. It's just the nature of having a smaller channel. It's fine. But look how ridiculous, like, you tune into, like, Destiny stream. We're, like, 6 days out of an election. In the past week, the bulk of the left-wing streamers I see on X have been fighting amongst each other. Like, Hassan! Anna Kasparian. That's where they're at. I'll be damned if I make that mistake. You're not going to see me like, I'm going at John Burke hard. Tip of the cap to John Burke. I think he's making a mistake not voting for Trump. I wish him the best. I still like John a lot. That's it. That's what I have to say. Happily talk to him and try to convince him to vote for Trump. That's it. I'm not going to waste... I'm trying to... That's why you've even seen when I take audience call-ins or, when I did that debate on the 19th Amendment, I've tried to make it very clear for like over a month now. I'm not really into talking about stuff that I think will harm our chances to win this election. I'll do debates with other people. That's fine. But within our own group, I don't think it's prudent to right now, a week before election, talk about, maybe we need to repeal the 19th Amendment. One, I don't think we should repeal the 19th Amendment. But second, even if you think that, certainly you want women voting for your side this election because it ain't going to be repealed by this election. So I even bring it up. Oh, that's right, Grungehead. Don't worry. They ain't watching me that closely. So I think Cernovich is right. Like a lot of this sort of, the problem's white women. The problem's people of color and how they vote. You want to make that argument 2 weeks from now? Fine. Why would you be saying that now? I don't give a shit. There could be a group out there, let's just say hypothetically, people whose family came here from Malaysia, 99% vote Democrat. I'm not insulting them right now. Maybe I could bump that from 1% to 4%. Great. So I do tip of the cap, even though I'm not going about it in the same way as Cernovich. I do agree with him that maybe, just maybe, not the time for that sort of stuff 6 days out from an election. Similarly, I've made this clear. I have problems with some of the people that are going to be on my stream, particularly people that are involved in the RNC in Pennsylvania, the PAGOP. I have some criticisms, we'll say. I'll be damned if I'm bringing them up on my 24-hour stream. Because I'm selling out? No. Because the entire point of the stream is to bring together people, I don't care from where, and try to reach as many people as possible the importance of voting for Trump and for Republicans. That's the point. And unlike many of these people that are never Trump Republicans that lost their voice when it came to criticizing Trump during his tenure, which I did heavily, it's not that I'm afraid and only willing to criticize Trump when I think that I'll see some personal benefit. It couldn't be further from the truth. I've criticized him many times. A week before the election's not the time. Trey Jones, I think you could go to Pisco's Twitter. That's the only place I would know to find it. So that's my policy. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. But Rob, you're trying to convince this former Democrat who's pro-choice to vote. They're an evil person. They like abortion. They're helping me save the country by voting for the party that will right now stop oppression. That's how I look at it. If you want to be ideological to the point where you cut off your nose to spite your face and you're telling would-be people that are willing to come to your side, kick rocks, I think you're making a mistake. Now, after the election, have at it. All right. What are we going to talk about? We got a message. Who messaged me? Here's some DMs I got from just the past week or so. 2 from yesterday. This guy says, "You are literal traitor scum." Just in case you don't believe me. Yeah. Literal traitor scum. Then we got, "You are garbage." True. I get some nice DMs. Let's see. Let's find some other ones. Here's a word I don't say anymore, but you can read it yourself. Fat. You get it. And then this person shares the same. Oh, boy. Bobby Brash, super chat, $10. Really love your content, man. You become one of my favorite YouTubers in the past few weeks. I won't be able to attend the 24-hour stream, but good luck. Hope it goes great. Thanks so much, Bobby. It means a lot. Thank you. Have I seen the short fat Taco 3-hour video? No. I don't know that I've ever watched a video from that person. I know of them. Taylor, yeah, I hear you. Garbage. Yeah. So let's do this. If I had more time, I don't know how long I can go today. We might be looking at just another half hour or so. So I understand what I'm about to talk about. It sort of goes against what I was just mentioning because I want to talk about some issues of corruption. Now, for me, that's the number one issue to vote. But it's difficult here 6 days before an election to make the case to people of all of these ins and outs of corruptions at these institutions. In general, the argument goes something like this. Individual politicians, executive branch members, etc., will come and go. They will. But the institutions will remain well past our lives unless something seriously changes. And so therefore, those institutions engaging in corruption is always more serious than an individual. So you might really despise Hillary Clinton. Probably have much reason to do so. But at the end of the day, Hillary Clinton, the person, is just a person. And maybe she would have became president. And maybe she could have done a lot of damage. But still, she's just one person that will eventually be gone. The fact that our institutions, particularly executive agencies such as the FBI, CIA, State Department, etc., are so corrupt is a far bigger threat. Max Reddick, thanks so much for the $5 super chat. Says, Rob, I messaged you on Twitter last night about Destiny's disingenuous take on Dave Smith's comments. Thought, yeah, I didn't message Destiny back, but Destiny basically makes the argument to Dave Smith, if it's true that Obama's a war criminal, then why wasn't he ever charged? And Max correctly points out to me on this post on X, well, isn't that the same argument that he makes when it comes to sort of insurrection? No one's been charged with an insurrection, so, right? And he says, that's stupid. So yeah, you're right. As always, disingenuous garbage. So in general, that's my thoughts on corruption and why I think it's an a priori issue. If we have people that are unelected officials in bureaucracies that really run this country, and me and you don't really have a say in how that runs, then we don't have a democracy. Then we don't have a republic. Then us disagreeing over insurance policy or border policy or foreign policies, all irrelevant because our voice doesn't matter anyways. So solving that corruption is a priority. I'm willing to work with Bernie bros. I'm willing to work with, moderate Democrats. I'm willing to work with anarchists, libertarians, socialists, whatever, to end that corruption, which I see as the most important issue. And of course, I'm always mocked for this. Oh, well, it's not corruption. So you can get into the specifics of it. But sometimes the specifics are overwhelming. Gizmo, thanks so much for the $2. Appreciate it, man. There is a bias that you see. For example, when I talked to Sitch and Adam, I know they got upset when I brought this up, but they mentioned my bias. I certainly have a bias. It's absolutely true. I have a bias against these institutions. But a lot of people have a bias for those institutions. And that doesn't mean that you're Republican bias or Democrat bias. It just means your threshold for when to think that there's enough evidence for you to think something is a double standard or corrupt is going to be much higher until the institutions who are tasked with investigating themselves tell you that there's corruption. What do you think the chances of that are? What do you think the chances are of the FBI investigating the FBI and saying the FBI is corrupt? Almost none. But there's a lot of people until that happens, until someone goes to jail. It just doesn't matter. And I understand it. I really do, because I understand where that bias comes from. And it's also, many of these situations are very complicated, and almost all of the institutions that control our narrative are pushing back against them. And so I've told this story before. For example, the Burisma story. My neighbor's smart dude, cool guy, Republican through and through, former Marine, great guy. Maybe we'll have him on the show sometime. Dude, this dude, by the way, let me talk about my neighbor Frank. I don't know if, sometimes he watches me. I don't know if Frank's watching right now. But Frank, seemingly overnight got freaking jacked, man. He started going to this gym, and, this dude must be putting in, 2 hours a day, 3-4 days a week. And he's looking mighty ripped. I'm like, Frank, you're killing it out there. So when my back gets better, he wants to drag my fat ass out to the gym, which I'll just be embarrassed. But he's a cool guy. He'll help me through shit. But Frank's looking quite good. But Frank ain't no dumb guy. Smart dude. Just a regular, redneck guy like me, though, right? I start talking to him about, a Burisma scandal or Crossfire Hurricane or something. And it's not that he's incapable of sitting there and hearing it and coming to a conclusion. It's just dude, I got so much going on in my life. I don't have time to sit here and listen to, let me talk to you about Igor Dushenko, or Mykola Zlochevsky. Let me talk to you about him and all these people. It's just tuning out. The shit that he relates to is grocery prices through the roof. Remember when they locked you down? Remember when your kids were locked down from school? Or how about the indoctrination that they try to spew into your kids with all this crazy stuff when you send them to school? That shit matters to him. And so when it comes to trying to move the needle for an election, the irony is the topic that I think is the most important, that of corruption, doesn't really move the needle that much. But that's okay, particularly when the side that you think is going to do the best job of the two sides against corruption also happens to be winning on the issues that matter to these people. The economy, the border, all the crazy indoctrination of kids stuff, foreign policy. So, me spending time right now talking about a lot of these scandals that new evidence is coming out on seemingly a daily basis now, how much does it really move the needle? Well, it pushes back on the Democrat argument that Trump's an authoritarian, that he's a fascist, that he's going to weaponize the legal system. But how many people didn't know that that's already what the Democrats are doing? I feel like that's something that you've probably already made your mind up. At this point, I don't know how many people were going to stay home and are now like, you know what? Now that I heard about the IRS whistleblowers talking to Catherine Herridge, I'm gonna go vote. I don't know. So, interesting. But the stories I wanted to talk about, there's two of them. Excuse me. The first story, give me a second to pull these up. Mr. Unprepared Rob. I miss writing for this website above top secret. I do miss it because it was a good place to put your stuff down in writing so you could go back to it. So let me pull up. Now this is real fun, right? Watching me look up evidence. I suppose I could at least show you what I'm looking at. These are all threads I wrote on Above Top Secret. Let's do this. No! It won't leave me. I don't know when I wrote this, so. It's got to be above this. I do apologize for this again. That might have something in it. Let's see what this one is. My goodness. Oh, where is this? No way I wrote that in 2018. All right. If I can't, let's try this. I really should have had this. But I really think you guys will like what I wrote here. Garbage. Search function sucks. Look, even here, like I clearly see. Now I feel like I have to find this damn thing. Ah, May 9th, 2018. Woo! We did it. Holy shit, what an adventure. Thank you all. What a terrible piece of garbage I am. What can I say? Biden was right. Alrighty. Now I just got to find one more source. Woo! We're nailing this today. All right. So we got the FBI whistleblower story. But this story is arguably more important. Boy, I was liking a lot of videos about Joe Biden calling us all garbage. Oh, Biden. By the way, God bless Steve Bannon. I didn't say it on channel yet. There we go. Now we're on it. Now we're on it. Okay. Here we go. All right, the Washington Times. Here we go. Ready? Okay. Remember, we are told that, I might screw the dates up this a little, but the official narrative we're told about the Russia investigation into Trump started July 31st, 2016. And we're told that that started, and this is what the IG claimed to have found, that the predicate was legitimate. Now, the IG had a lot of problems. Basically, the bar is so low for the FBI to start an investigation. They could start it on basically a rumor. The question is the steps that they took legitimate? And the IG report had a lot of problems with the steps they took. And the Durham report had even more problems that basically said the problem isn't any specific rule. It was the culture at the FBI that was designed to basically go get Trump. But one of the big celebrations that you heard from the Democrats was, there was no FBI corruption. The IG report said that there was a predicate that was okay. The problem would be if that predicate wasn't the actual start. And I'd been saying for years, put a bug in your ear, I'd been saying, I believe we'll eventually find out that the investigation into Trump started before what the FBI is claiming. The FBI is claiming that the reason they started this investigation was once they found out that the DNC and Hillary servers were hacked, that they heard this story from this Australian who's a Clinton supporter friend, Alexander Downer, an Australian diplomat that had worked with the Clinton Foundation, who basically comes out to them and says, I talked to this guy that works on Trump's team. His name's George Papadopoulos. He said that he talked to a Russian that had emails of Hillary Clinton. And that's the predicate for starting the entire Crossfire Hurricane. Now, why does this matter? It is my claim that, much like Chuck Schumer said, that the FBI, the intel agencies, etc., were going to find 6 ways Sunday to get back at Trump, because he was seen as someone who's outside these institutions. And to me, a corrupt FBI is far more serious than a corrupt president. That's why even the lock her up stuff, I wasn't that big on board. I had more of a problem with the actions of the FBI, which is a far bigger threat because it will remain in perpetuity. No one voted for those people. If the most powerful law enforcement and intel agency in the world decides to weaponize against one political opponent and protect another, that's more interference than anything Russia, China, the UK, etc. could do combined. Okay? So, here's the story out of the Washington Times. Whistleblower. James Comey had FBI honeypot spies infiltrate Trump's 2016 campaign. Alleged off-the-books investigation predated FBI's Russia collusion probe. This is from the other day, October 29th, yesterday, I guess. The House Judiciary Committee is examining a whistleblower report that the FBI targeted Donald Trump soon after he announced his presidential campaign in June 2015. More than a year before we were told that the official investigation started. An off-the-books operation ordered by FBI Director James Comey that predated Crossfire Hurricane. Now remember, my allegation has always been, they were like, show me the man and I'll find you the crime. I assume that almost any billionaire or anyone involved in high-level politics in Washington, if you, with a microscope, looked into their life, you can find some crime. And so if we have a system that just allows the FBI to say, okay, we don't like that guy, let's upend their life. Let's look into everything about them. We'll send spies, whatever. That basically means that they're all powerful. An FBI agent involved in the probe revealed off-the-books criminal investigation on Tuesday in a protected disclosure sent to the committee. So an agent that was involved. The whistleblower disclosure said 2 female FBI undercover agents infiltrated Trump's 2016 campaign at high levels and were directed to act as honeypots. For those that don't know, honeypots like usually a woman, though I suppose it could be an attractive man, that's basically designed to seduce someone in the political world, that they could then use that information that they get to blackmail or to find information while traveling with Trump and his campaign staff. According to the disclosure, which the Washington Times reviewed, the investigation differed from the later Crossfire Hurricane counterintelligence operation targeting Russia collusion. It said the early off-the-books probe was a criminal investigation targeting Mr. Trump and his 2016 presidential campaign staff. The agent personally knew that Mr. Comey ordered an FBI investigation against Mr. Trump and that Mr. Comey personally directed it. So this comes directly from the leader of the FBI, James Comey, who we could see afterwards had no love for Donald Trump and has basically been out to get him ever since. The off-the-books investigation did not appear to target a specific crime, but was more of what agents would describe as a fishing expedition to find something incriminating about Mr. Trump. That means there's no predicate. They just said, whatever, investigate that dude and find something. Times reached out to FBI and Comey for comment. House Judiciary Committee spokesman said the committee received the whistleblower allegations and plans to look into them. Yeah, they won't do anything. The whistleblower said the undercover operation was hidden from the Justice Department Inspector Horowitz, the IG, who investigated misconduct of the Bureau's probe of the Trump campaign. The whistleblower disclosure also said the secret investigation may indicate institutional bias against Trump. Though, quote, it does not appear that any information about this investigation was turned over to Trump's criminal defense counsels. In other words, another thing they did that was corrupt. Former FBI assistant Chris Swecker said the report, if true, is a booming, egregious violation of the rules governing the Attorney General and the FBI. Quote, it's an unpredicated infiltration of a presidential campaign which is sensitive, he told the Times. It's sensitive to the point, by the way, I now realize I need to redo something. Crossfire Hurricane didn't start in July 2016, it started in July 2015. So this would predate that, not by a year, but by a month. It's an unpredicated infiltration of the presidential campaign, which is sensitive. It's sensitive to the point where it would have been approved by the Attorney General and would have to be predicated. And in this case, that means Loretta Lynch. By the way, the same Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, that knew that James Comey, who she had power over, was investigating Hillary Clinton, who knew that her husband, Bill Clinton, would somehow be involved in this and yet personally met with him on a tarmac and then refused to recuse herself. So she was signing off on no predicate investigating Trump while at the same time meeting with Bill Clinton on a tarmac. You can't make this stuff up. In this case, I'm not hearing any predication. It would have to be on the books anyway, regardless. Mr. Trump launched his campaign in June 16, 2015, a year before the FBI opened Crossfire Hurricane. Or maybe it was a year. Yeah. Counterintelligence investigation into the Trump. Yeah, I guess it was a year. I take back what I said. The FBI investigation into the Justice Department Special Counsel probe did not find evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. The early off-the-books investigation, according to disclosure, had no predicated foundation, so Mr. Comey personally directed the investigation without creating an official case file in the Sentinel or any other FBI system. Disclosure notes the FBI has multiple methods of concealing the highly sensitive investigations, so Mr. Comey did not have a legitimate reason to avoid creating a case file. Mr. Comey served as director from from 2013 to May 2017, when Trump fired him. Disclosure said the deputy director, Dave Bowditch, and Paul Abate, assistant director in charge of the Washington field office, were also involved in helping Mr. Comey execute the secret probe. The undercover honeypot agents targeted Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, according to the whistleblower. Mr. Papadopoulos pleaded guilty to felony charge of making false statements in October 2017 about U.S.-Russian relations. Trump pardoned him. Now that's the part that's important. George Papadopoulos. Old Georgie boy. That was the beginning of this all in 2016. George Papadopoulos. Now, if you don't know the story of George Papadopoulos, well, you know what? Let's see what 2019 Rob was saying. When did I write this? 2018. Apologies that I can't get dark mode to work here, so we're going to have to deal with this. Here you go. This is my name, Grambler. That's my name on Above Top Secret. See the date? May 7th, 2018. That's how long I've been looking into this stuff. 6 years ago. More than 6 years ago. Let's see what I said. We are told the investigation into Trump-Russia collusion started with a look into Trump team associate George Papadopoulos. I've long argued that this is an absurd reason to start an investigation that led to the wiretapping of people associated with Trump's team, the unmasking of individuals, and eventually led to the special counselor Mueller and the seeming never-ending investigation we see today. Again, this was May 2018. I've been looking into the Papadopoulos matter, and I've found that there are many coincidences and strange happenings going on that I feel are not being covered at all by the mainstream media. Again, I remind you, this is me writing in 2018. Where have the Republicans been? How was I picking up on this in 2018? The story. The story was first broken by the New York Times, I believe, in which sought to clarify that it wasn't the controversial dossier that started the FBI looking into Trump's team, but was the actual actions of Trump team member George Papadopoulos, hereafter referred to as GP. Here's the New York Times story. And again, the important thing to note here, what I'm saying is, originally, it was the dossier. That was the first story that broke. CNN, if you remember, this is what happened. We had this dossier that was paid for by Hillary's team and the DNC that was sourced by a suspected Russian spy named Igor Dushenko that went through this law firm through Mark Elias and Fusion GPS, who then paid this former MI6 guy, Christopher Steele, who was also working with the Hillary team, to kind of put this out to give like an official capacity to it. But the allegations were coming from a suspected Russian spy, paid for by Hillary's team, which the FBI then took, didn't verify, and used it to spy on Trump's team. Carter Page got a FISA warrant against him. That's all true. It's all been confirmed. Those FISA warrants were illegal. All confirmed. And again, I remind you, the official narrative was all of this had to happen because we needed to investigate whether or not Trump's team was colluding with Russians to get dirt on Hillary Clinton to help win the election. And the way the FBI sought to prove that was by taking evidence from Hillary Clinton's team, who was colluding with Russians to get actual dirt on their opponent. They literally, it's the equivalent of breaking into someone's house to prove that they broke into your house, only to find out that they never broke into your house. That means you broke into their house. That's what happened. There was Russia collusion. It was Hillary Clinton's team. And the FBI took it hook, line, and sinker and said, oh boy, now that we know Hillary's team colluded with Russians, let's use the evidence, the dirt they found. Let's not verify it and use it to spy on Trump's team. That's in July of 2016. That's the official narrative. By the way, same Democrats that yell about January 6th and all this stuff, none of them gave a shit. They didn't care when I was talking about it in 2017. They don't give a shit in 2020. They didn't give a shit now in 2024. They don't care. They claimed that Russia collusion was the biggest, most serious thing in the world for 4 years. And then when we found out, yes, Russia collusion existed, it was Hillary's team. They were like, it's not that big of a deal. Almost like they never cared. Just like, sound familiar? Just like Tony Hinchcliffe's joke calling people garbage, which he didn't call people garbage. He called a spot of land garbage in a joke. But when Joe Biden calls Trump supporters garbage, it's not that big of a deal. I'll give a quick rundown, but I encourage all to read the article to make sure I'm representing it correctly. I'm not going to go through this article, but I'll put it here. There's a paywall. You can check it out yourself. By the way, I will also link my little post here from Above Top Secret. Check it out. George Papadopoulos named to Trump's team and ends up meeting a Maltese professor named Joseph Mifsud. Brief break here. I talked about this the other day, but when you saw Trump on Joe Rogan's show and he was talking about how difficult it was to find people to staff the 10,000 people he needed to for the agencies once he was president. The same is true of his campaign team. If you're trying to drain the swamp, but you need people qualified to run a campaign and to be in these governmental positions, the only people that on paper are going to be qualified are people that have already been involved in the swamp. So you end up with people that really haven't worked with other campaigns. And George Papadopoulos and Carter Page were two of these sort of characters. So it wasn't that Trump deeply knew these people or they were high-level people or anything like that. They just happened to be low-level staffers in his campaign. But, as we saw from the Washington Times story, the FBI was targeting these people, particularly Papadopoulos, because they saw, oh boy, here's potentially a weak link. George Papadopoulos gets named to Trump's team and ends up meeting a Maltese professor named Joseph Mifsud. At first, Mifsud has no interest in George Papadopoulos, but when he found out he was working with Trump, he took an interest and ends up introducing him to a Russian woman named Olga Polanskaya. Remember that name, Olga. We'll just call her Olga. With hopes of setting up a meeting between Trump and Putin. I'm not gonna bury the lead. I would not be surprised if Olga turns out to be one of those FBI agents that was a honeypot. Remember that. We don't have proof of that yet. We know that 2 honeypot women were sent, according to this whistleblower, if the whistleblower is telling the truth, which we always have to trust whistleblowers. We learned that when whistleblowers were speaking against Trump. Remember, we couldn't even say the whistleblowers' names because it was so damaging to them. We have to believe the whistleblowers. So if we're believing this whistleblower, 2 honeypots were sent to George Papadopoulos well before Crossfire Hurricane. That would line up with this Olga lady. Just saying. We'll see. in hopes of setting up a meeting between Trump and Putin. Mifsud incorrectly describes the woman as Putin's niece. Mifsud also sets up a meeting with George Papadopoulos with a man named Ivan Timofeev, who is described as a direct link to Russia's foreign ministry. Papadopoulos then discusses with the Trump campaign, but Sessions tells him they are not interested. Papadopoulos kept pushing to meet with the Russians for the purpose of improving relations with Russia, he claims, and then some Trump people seemed to warm to the idea, though no one ever traveled to Russia. Now on to the meat of it. In late April 2016, Mifsud tells George Papadopoulos that he has learned that Russian has emails that make Hillary look bad. George Papadopoulos gets drunk in May and tells an Australian diplomat, Alexander Downer, about his connections to Russia and the fact that they have emails that make Hillary look bad. The problems. Now let's go over some of the problems with using this story as a reason to launch the seemingly never-ending Russia investigation. Look at some of the characters in this story. 1. Hacked emails. At just the initial level, this story makes no sense as a reason to start this investigation. The veracity of the story hinges on the fact that George Papadopoulos discussed Russia having Hillary emails, and then months later it being found out that the DNC was hacked. In other words, the Russians knew about the DNC hack before Hillary's camp did, therefore proving that the Russians told George Papadopoulos about the emails. They must have known it was the same emails that Russia supposedly hacked. The problem with this is the fact that many people, including media personalities, politicians, and others, were discussing months before Russians allegedly told George Papadopoulos about these emails that Hillary's personal server, the one in her house that resulted in the FBI investigation of her, may have been hacked by foreign intel sources such as Russia, China, etc., and may have dirt on her. Note the language the New York Times uses. In late April at the London hotel, Mr. Mifsud told Mr. Papadopoulos that he had just learned from high-level Russian officials in Moscow that Russians had dirt on Mrs. Clinton in the forms of thousands of emails, according to the court documents. Although Russian hackers had been mining data from the Democrat National Committee's computer for months, that information was not yet public. Even the committee didn't know. It just says it says emails that are dirt on Hillary. It doesn't say that were hacked from the DNC server or from John Podesta's emails. The Russian is making a claim that everyone had been worrying about for months, that Russia hacked Hillary's server and had dirt on her. If you are a Russian trying to convince someone you had the goods on Hillary, this is exactly what you would say, seeing as how the entire world knew Hillary was careless with her server and may have been hacked. So the claim that this somehow is proof that George Papadopoulos and the Russian had knowledge of the DNC hack well before it was ever discovered is just not true. Given this, from the get-go, we have this entire Russia investigation started because a minor member of Trump's team got drunk and told an Australian diplomat, and a Russian told him that they had emails on Hillary, which is a claim that had publicly been worried about for months, which is absurd. Next, Jeff Sessions says no. Another part of the story that makes being the beginning of the investigation odd is that even the New York Times story admits that Trump's team, in the person of Jeff Sessions, told Papadopoulos they were not interested in meeting Putin. Now, yes, the New York Times article does go on to say that others in Trump's team seem to encourage Papadopoulos reaching out to Russians, but that is hardly a big deal. In fact, as the New York Times again admits, there's no proof George Papadopoulos ever mentioned these emails Russia had to anyone inside the Trump campaign. So think of the precedent this sets. If any member of any campaign gets drunk and says something stupid, or even does something stupid, the entire campaign could be put under investigation that may last years. Wiretaps may be put on, conversations unmasked, and even if there's not only proof that the campaign was involved, but they're actively telling the drunk guy they aren't interested in just what he's pushing. Next, Alexander Downer, a real downer. Now let's look at a few of the characters of importance. First, Alexander Downer is crucial to the entire story because he is the Australian diplomat that told the FBI that George Papadopoulos had discussed these emails that were dirt on Hillary. Now first, it's important to note that Downer did not speak up until months later when WikiLeaks released the DNC emails. That would suggest that Downer did not find George Papadopoulos' story credible or worrisome enough to say anything when he first heard it. In other words, Downer hears this story and then waits months before he ends up saying anything to the FBI. Now, who exactly is this important player, the man whose claims got the entire investigation into Trump-Russia collusion started? Would it surprise you to know he's actually a friend of the Clintons? It was instrumental in helping create $25 million for the Clinton Foundation. From the Hill? The Australian diplomat whose tip in 2016 prompted the Russia-Trump investigation previously arranged one of the largest foreign donations to Bill and Hillary Clinton's charitable efforts, documents show. Foreign Australian Minister Alexander Downer's role in securing the $25 million in aid from his country to help the Clinton Foundation fight AIDS is chronicled in a decade-old government's memo archived on the Australian Foreign Ministry website. Downer and former President Clinton jointly signed a memorandum of understanding in February 2016 that spread out the grant money for over 4 years to a project providing screening and drug treatment for AIDS. And to make matters worse, there seems to be an investigation about corruption involving the giving of that $25 million to the Clinton Foundation. From LifeSet, an Australian investigative journalist who is a retired police detective said Tuesday he has been asked to provide the FBI with details about multiple allegations of mishandling millions of dollars contributed to the Clinton Foundation by the Aussie government. Quote, I've been asked to provide the FBI with further and better particulars about allegations regarding improper donations to the Clinton Foundation funded by Australian taxpayers. At the center of the complaints were the former Bill Clinton, former Secretary of State in 2016 presidential Hillary Clinton, and multiple Australian government officials, including senior diplomat Alexander Downer, the government's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. How convenient that the person who is the linchpin in starting the investigation into Trump and his team involved in a possibly questionable donation of $25 million to the Clinton Foundation. So now we have two big starts to the Trump team investigation. This George Papadopoulos story, which has a Clinton friend as the linchpin, and the dossier, which was funded by Hillary Clinton. Isn't it odd that all the evidence that starts the investigations into Trump team start with Hillary or her friends? We are now being told by Devin Nunes, who headed the House Intel's committee investigation into Trump-Russia collusion and found no such thing occurred, that in fact there were no official intel from the Australian government that came to the U.S. That's exactly what it says. If this is true, it means that the Australian Intel Service didn't even give the U.S. Intel this info. It was all given by just one Clinton friend. Imagine if the shoe was on the other foot and some diplomat somewhere that had been business ties to Trump said that some DNC member had mentioned hacks by a country like China on Trump. Based merely off the word of that diplomat, Trump then uses his FBI to investigate his opponents for years on end, issuing wiretaps, unmasking people, leaking to the media to make them look bad, etc. This would be an outrage. Yes, this is exactly what we see here. Next, enter the Mifsud. Another central character in this, and this is the most important part probably. So let me slow down because I know I could read fast. Another central character in this story is Joseph Mifsud, the Maltese professor that took George Papadopoulos under his wing and started facilitating these meetings with Russians. I've read some articles about him recently that made me want to write this thread. An initial appearance, it seems Mifsud is a Russian sympathizing professor who has connections to the Kremlin. This would make his relationship with George Papadopoulos and his attempt to connect him with Russians seem more nefarious. However, there's more than meets the eye. It turns out that Mifsud's connections to Russia are rather vague and not as apparent as the New York Times article would appear to suggest. However, his ties to the Italian intel community and by proxy the CIA are actually much more obvious, yet seem to not be reported on nearly as much. Quote, in a rush, American and European journalists started digging into Joseph Mifsud. The reporting was excellent to begin with. As the Washington Post had an unfair month-long head start, they were the first to focus on Mifsud's ties to Italy. Mifsud helped establish in Rome Link Campus with senior Italian politician who had been implicated in a series of scandals. The university later withdrew its participation, but they failed to elaborate on the scandals or the fact that it involved Italian intelligence services. Mifsud was certainly more than a humble academic. The Guardian then picked it up. Link Campus had a reputation for being closely connected with some elements within the Italian intelligence services. It was an understatement. Link Campus is the intelligence central. It attracted foreign intelligence organizations. The CIA worked there. Now, I know people will say Zero Hedge is a bad source, which I disagree, but notice that all the sources are linked that are being discussed. So, for example, let's see what The Guardian had to say about Link Campus, where Mifsud collaborated and their connections to the Italian intel community. From The Guardian, Mifsud's professional activities are not limited to the UK. In Rome, he is an official at Link Campus University, which is headed by former Italian Interior Minister named Vincenzo Scotti. One Rome-based professor claimed Link Campus had a reputation for being closely connected to some elements within the Italian intelligence services. Mifsud's a person who collaborates us, said one person reached at Link Campus. I encourage everyone who reads the Zero Hedge article to go to the linked articles and fact check for yourself. Although connections to the Italian intel community may not seem like that big of a deal, the next part is more troubling. One of Mifsud's great friends and co-workers is a person by the name of Gianna Pittella. Now keep in mind, the loose connections between Mifsud and Russia were all that were needed to raise eyebrows, so surely this connection to Pittella, which are much tighter, would seem to also warrant investigation. So who is Patella? From the Zero Hedge article. Quote, I found Mifsud's link to Gianna Patella and the Democratic National Committee on the November 3rd and tweeted it to the BBC journalist. John wrote, Gianna Patella and his caro amico Joseph Mifsud on the blog a few days later. Journalists were interested in our loose alliance because we are churning out large amounts of linkages and stories that hadn't been covered. But the interest of Mifsud's ties to European intelligence figures began to drop off rapidly. Here's an article showing strong connections between Patella and Mifsud. This is from John Worth, EU. Yet there's one Brussels politician who knows Mifsud very well, and no one in EU circles have seemed to have woken up and noticed it yet. Gianna Patella, the leader of the S&D group in European Parliament and hence one of the most important and senior MEPs. Patella's page on Wikipedia lists that he is a lecturer at the London Academy of Diplomacy, Mifsud's outfit that was affiliated at the University of East Anglia and the University of Stirling. Patella's role at the LAD is also mentioned on his page at the S&D Group site and Patella's own site. There are 2 videos on YouTube where Patella speaks as his role at the LAD. Patella and Mifsud are both Diplomat magazine piece about LAD. Patella is listed as a visiting professor on the now deleted Stirling Uni page about LAD. Here's Patella on a conference panel with Mifsud and mentioned together with him at eMuni. And there are similar links at Link Campus University too. Patella talks about Mifsud thus. Joseph is my dear friend, and I cannot believe he's involved in Russiagate, an Italian news story. This is more than people who happen to meet at events. It's not only academic. Patella has brought Mifsud campaigning with him. See this pic from a PD rally with Mifsud. So a strong MP in Brussels, a colleague of Mifsud at the LAD, the school they worked at, which I'll get into in a minute, and apparently a close friend of Mifsud's. Strange that nebulous ties to Russians from Mifsud would warrant such scrutiny, but his close connections to a strong leader in EU Parliament would go largely ignored. And there's one more thing you should know about Mifsud's close friend and colleague Patella. He attended the Democrat National Convention and campaigned for Hillary Clinton. Gianna Patella, a longtime Italian member of European Parliament, hit the campaign trail this week. Sitting at the back of the Grand Cafe L'Aquila, he warned that a group of local business people and supporters of the evils of fascism. Sound familiar? Except Patella wasn't touring Italy. He was sitting in Philadelphia, trying to convince American voters to oppose an American candidate, Donald Trump. Quote, I've taken the unprecedented step of endorsing and campaigning for Hillary Clinton because the risks of Donald Trump is too high, Patella told the Time. I believe it is in the interest of the European Union and Italy to have Hillary Clinton in office. A Trump victory could be a disaster between the relationship between the USA and Italy. What another strange coincidence. So now we know that a person who was campaigning for Hillary Clinton, that was a good friend of Mifsud, who worked at these universities that had ties to Western intelligence, is campaigning with Hillary Clinton's friends with Joseph Mifsud, but no one ever looks into the Mifsud's ties into that. It's just, well, Mifsud allegedly has ties to Russia. Now let's go back to the Zero Hedge article. Notice what he says about the LAD, the university where Mifsud and Patella work. Luke Harding of The Guardian wrote a profile on Simona Maggiante in January. She was connected to Gianna Patella, George Papadopoulos, and Joseph Mifsud. He had wanted to examine the claim that John Worth's blogs and my research that Patella was a fulcrum. Quote, she was introduced to Mifsud in about 2012 by Gianna Patella, a well-known Italian MEP who in 2014 became president of the Socialist and Progressive Democrat Group. I always saw Mifsud with Patella, claimed Mangiati. She also said the London Center for International Law Practice Mifsud was a facade. I never met any Russians there, but the center certainly wasn't what it pretended to be. Harding tries to make this place sound like a Russian front. She acknowledged to The Guardian she might have inadvertently been sucked to a Russian intelligence plot. Chris continued, the problem is there's nothing Russian about this university or the London Academy of Diplomacy. Both organizations have ties to British Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Patella's links to the Democratic National Committee were well known to Mifsud scholars in Europe. So why was Harding omitting a rather pertinent part of the story and pushing it towards Russia? So it turns out that the universities that Mifsud was working at had connections to British intelligence, Italian intelligence, and the CIA. The guy that was one of his good friends that he's palling around with is someone who's actively working with the DNC and campaigning for Hillary Clinton. And yet none of this comes up. Instead, we're told, and as you'll see, everyone's like shocked, like, wait a minute, this guy that we always assumed was working for Western intelligence, turns out he was a Russian spy all along? Why was there never an investigation into his connections to Western intelligence? We're just like, oh, he was Russian, end of story. Remember, this is the central figure that we're told, if you buy the official FBI investigation and the Mueller investigation, this is the guy at the center of everything that gets the ball rolling. He is the central figure, Joseph Mifsud, this professor. He is the spy for Russia that initially infiltrated Trump's campaign by convincing George Papadopoulos to talk to Russians. Now, I don't know if it's included in my write-up I did here. We'll finish it out. We will. But famously, or infamously, Mueller is asked specifically by Jim Jordan in his testimony, is it not true that when the FBI interviewed Mifsud that he lied to the FBI? Yes, says Mueller. Then why wasn't he charged? You charged Mike Flynn, you charged George Papadopoulos, you charged Roger Stone, you charged all these Americans for the crime of lying to the investigators, but not the Russian spy? You didn't charge him. And of course, the defenders will go, well, they couldn't find him, so why would they charge him? Didn't stop them from charging 19 Russians in the Internet Research Agency that they knew that they'd never be able to extradite. When Mueller's asked, why didn't you charge Mifsud? He's basically like, he gets all animated. It's like, we don't talk about charging decisions. Right. So for some reason, they had leniency against the central figure who's alleged to be the sort of tip of the spear for the Russian spies infiltrating Trump. Isn't that interesting? They just let him off the hook. We'll go after all these low-level people, throw the book at them, but not the central guy. We're going to let him go. Oh, and by the way, he palled around constantly with this other diplomat from Brussels that's campaigning for Hillary Clinton. Oh, by the way, he worked for a bunch of universities that have connections to Western intelligence. But we just said, we'll let him go. We'll let him off the hook. We're not going to look into any of that. And now he's just disappeared. No one knows where he's been for years now. He's just disappeared. We'll continue here. So the media is pushing that the LAD is some sort of Russian-connected university, when in reality it has ties to the UK government. Mifsud has stronger proven ties to Patella than any Russians, and Patella campaigned for Hillary. Perhaps Papadopoulos is being led along all the while by people who wanted Hillary to win, and were looking to gather info on what Trump's team was doing and hope to smear them as connected to Russians. Let's review. The two most key figures in the George Papadopoulos story are Alexander Downer, the Australian diplomat who told the FBI about his drunken conversation with George Papadopoulos where he had Russian emails, and Joseph Mifsud, the professor that set up the meeting between the Russians and George Papadopoulos. Both of them, it turns out, Mifsud through his friend Patella, have ties to Hillary Clinton. How weird that all of these investigations are, the focal point is people connected to Hillary. Now, go back to now. That's 2018. Now let's go back to yesterday's story. The undercover honeypot agents targeted Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, according to the Whistleblower. Remember, this was starting in June 2015. This would have been around the time when George Papadopoulos was meeting with Joseph Mifsud. What I have always alleged is the most likely scenario that happened was either UK intelligence services either working with or without the United States, CIA, and FBI. So either the FBI and CIA knew about it or worked with them, or they just knew about it. They sent an asset by the name of Joseph Mifsud and planted the story to George Papadopoulos. Russians have emails. They knew eventually Papadopoulos would go, well, that's interesting. Then there are honeypots sent. Attractive women. Papadopoulos, this low-level guy, is like, hey, what's up, honey? Then they send in another Clinton associate, Alexander Downer, to chum up Papadopoulos at a bar. And Papadopoulos says, yeah, I heard that these Russians have emails. They planted the story about Russians having emails. Then they sent a guy that basically got the information out on the other end. And that was used as the excuse to start the entire Crossfire Hurricane investigation. Set up from the get-go. In one of the biggest acts of corruption in the history of our country, the biggest political scandal in the history of our country. That was always the most likely scenario. That explains why Mueller and the FBI weren't interested in going after Joseph Mifsud. Why else would they leave the Central Russian spy off the hook? No interest. And again, you could say, well, maybe they didn't have enough evidence to bring him to court that he was a spy. They said they had enough evidence that he lied, and that's what they charged Papadopoulos with. Papadopoulos, who wasn't considered to be a spy. He was just a dupe. So if you're going to charge the guy that's just a dupe, why wouldn't you charge the Russian spy? Now we have an allegation that there are these honeypots. So it went from my strong feeling that this was likely the case. Now we know that the FBI in June of 2015, according to an FBI whistleblower who says I was involved in the investigation, personally ordered by James Comey, that they were sending these honeypots directly targeting George Papadopoulos. You understand why I say the first thing that needs to happen is the complete and total disbandment of the FBI? They create the scandal and then have someone tell them about the scandal and go, that gives us reasons to investigate the team that we don't like. Now, on top of that story, we have Catherine Herridge. Why can I never pronounce her name? Catherine Herridge, who's talking with the IRS whistleblowers Shapley and Ziegler again. I'm going to link this so you all could watch it at your own leisure. But this story is just breaking. She sits down with these whistleblowers and they say they knew the big guy was Joe Biden. The FBI knew the laptop was real. They were told that they weren't allowed to take actual investigative steps because an upcoming election. That's completely the opposite of how the DOJ investigating Trump has behaved with Jack Smith, trying to do everything he can to release information before the election. They weren't allowed to ask questions about the big guy, and it was all with the purpose of affecting the 2020 election. Now it's being reported today that one of those whistleblowers that just did that interview has now been told he has 15 days to choose whether to be demoted or let go. That's SSA Shapley. And they've testified in the past that they've been targeted as whistleblower, as have whistleblowers from the FBI that have came out. Again, we're told Trump's a threat to democracy, that he would weaponize these institutions. And yet we repeatedly see under the Biden DOJ, whistleblowers that are coming out saying there is corruption at these institutions designed to protect the Biden family, and then the whistleblowers say they are targeted. Where is the media? When it came to Eric Charamella, remember him, the whistleblower that heard Trump's Ukrainian phone call? We couldn't even say his name, remember? He must be protected at all costs. Trump will retaliate. Now we have whistleblowers against the Biden DOJ, and the media is like, Unlike Charamella, who was held as a hero saving the Republic, these people were treated like shit. And it turns out they were right. That's what happened. Now, on top of all of this is the question of the Hunter Biden laptop itself. And even though we've seen from the Twitter files that there was all sorts of government agencies that were gaslighting and pressuring social media companies to censor Russian disinformation and priming them that, hey, there's going to be a story, it's going to have the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. What we've been told over and over again by people like Pisco and people on the left is, but it doesn't directly say that the FBI told them to censor the Hunter Biden laptop story. Now, we recently had Zuckerberg come out and make a statement that that Hunter Biden's name was directly mentioned. We know from the whistleblowers, Shapley and Ziegler, that the FBI knew for a long, long time that the Hunter Biden laptop was real. So they would have known the allegations on that laptop, specifically about Hunter Biden being connected to Burisma and getting money for the big guy and all of this stuff, they would have known that that laptop was real and those allegations were out there and eventually might be made public in a sort of October surprise. But never mind that, says the left. It's not a direct smoking gun. Well, now we have it. Now we have the direct smoking gun. So Jim Jordan and the House committee that's looking into this, we'll just read their thread. How the FBI pre-bunked a true story about the Biden family's corruption before the 2020 election. The FBI knew Hunter Biden's laptop was real and worked for months to prime big tech to censor the New York Post story. Here's how the FBI pre-bunked it. Here's a statement that you can see. One of the emails they got from one of these people at social media. It says, when we get hauled up on the Hill, this is from July 2020, when we get hauled up on the Hill to testify on why we influenced the 2020 elections, we could say we have been meeting for years with the U.S. government to plan for it. Direct email from a member of the social media administration. In late 2019, the FBI obtained secret confirmed that the Hunter Biden laptop was real. The laptop had damning material. In October 2019, the FBI became aware that a repair shop had a laptop allegedly belonging to Hunter Biden, and it may contain evidence of a crime. The FBI verified its authenticity in November 2019 by matching the device number against Hunter Biden's Apple iCloud ID. When the FBI took possession of the device in December 2019, they notified the IRS it likely contained evidence of tax crimes. Thus, Special Agent Blank drafted an affidavit for search. So we know that the FBI knew the laptop was legitimate. Next, just a few months later, while in possession of Hunter's laptop, the FBI started meeting with big tech to warn about potential Russian disinformation ahead of the election. In total, the FBI and big tech met over 30 times in the 2020 before the Biden family corruption story came out. Here's some emails they include. Good morning. Wanted to follow up to see if you're okay with the schedule noted below. If so, we'll circulate as final the industry today. Wanted to share an agenda of the U.S. government industry meeting scheduled from 2 to 3:30 on Wednesday, October 7th. Additionally, to facilitate the logistics for the call, we've included dial-in information. The agenda. Threat updates. Threat from the USG, foreign activity, deep dive. Updates on the USG process, election day, delegitimization claims to counter, hack and leak concerns, election official reporting. That's okay, we'll say the Democrats. Doesn't specifically mention Hunter Biden, so it's okay. Next, FBI warned big tech what to watch for. Who? The Russians. What? Hack and leak operation. When? October surprise. Why? To reveal, quote, links between the Biden family and Ukraine, including Burisma. Internal Facebook emails a month before the New York Post story came out show big tech got specific warnings. Threat assessment. Again, this is from the U.S. government to social media. We have recently received indication from U.S. government partners, this is from the social media people, that they believe there is a risk of a hack leak operation conducted by Russians, likely involving real or manufactured evidence concerning links between the Biden family and Ukraine, including the oil company Burisma. Timing for something like this is uncertain, but could happen as soon as the first presidential debate on September 29th. While this assessment is still uncertain, an inoculating announcement about the hack leak now will mitigate the impact of such a leak if it does occur, and send a strong message about Facebook's proactive stance even if no such link materializes. Do you get that? That's the smoking gun. Does everybody get that? Facebook internal communications are admitting, well after the FBI knew the laptop was real, that the FBI and U.S. government's reaching out to them saying, hey, there could be this leak coming. It's going to come like an October surprise. And it's going to be from Russians. And we need to stop Russian disinformation. And it's specifically going to be about the Biden family and connections to Burisma. Meanwhile, the FBI well knows that this laptop is out there that talks about the Biden family and their connections to Burisma, and that story is likely to be put out there. And so what do? They go to social media and they say, hey, how would they, imagine imagine they knew this laptop was real and was using the exact story within the laptop to tell social media companies, this story may break, and if it does, it's Russian disinformation. The FBI spent months establishing who, what, when, and why behind a potential foreign hack and leak operation. And it just so happened to match the damning contents of the Biden family corruption on Hunter Biden's laptop, which the FBI had since late 2019. Quite the coincidence, but it wasn't a coincidence. Judiciary, GOP, and Weaponization Committee obtained testimony from key FBI witnesses that the FBI officials who knew the FBI had Hunter Biden's laptop were the same ones meeting with Big Tech when Big Tech was warned of a hack and leak involving the Bidens. Question, and prior to the story's publication, were you aware the FBI was in possession of a laptop and a hard drive attributed to Hunter Biden? Answer. I don't recall the exact time frame, but I'm fairly certain I knew that we were in possession of a laptop associated with Hunter Biden prior to that story coming out. Yes. Question. When the information was relayed to you following the Twitter call that the first agent had said the laptop was real, just to clarify, you knew prior to that conversation that the laptop was real. Is that correct? Answer. Yes, I did. But you don't recall approximately when you learned. Further down, this is from Laura Demlow, then China unit chief of the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force. What about individuals on the Russian unit? I would assume that the unit chief was also aware. I'm pretty certain of that fact. So the very people that are reaching out are the FBI agents that knew the laptop was real. So even if it wasn't, what we're told to believe is, this is the narrative that they want you to believe, that these agents from all of these government institutions that are reaching out to social media just happen to literally come up with the exact scenario of what was on the Hunter Biden laptop. They just took a shot in the dark. Hey, maybe Russia will hack something and maybe it'll have to do with Burisma. Just randomly taking a company's name out of a hat. And, in Ukraine, and maybe it'll be about the Biden family. Just taking a shot in the dark. That's the Democrat narrative. That's what we're supposed to believe. When the U.S. government's reaching out to social media companies, that's what they've said. We don't have the smoking gun that they knew that the laptop was real. We don't know that. Or the people that were reaching out, they weren't the ones that knew the laptop was real. Well, now we have testimony that the very people that were reaching out to social media were admitting, yes, we knew that the contents of the laptop was real. Then when the New York Post story broke, Biden family corruption story came out, Big Tech did what the FBI primed them to do. They censored it. Facebook demoted it for a week right before the election, and Twitter prevented anyone from sharing a link to the story. Now, I want to talk about this for a second. Believe it or not, it wasn't the censorship of the story that is the most damaging thing. Because inevitably, you sort of have the Streisand effect. Oh, that story's being censored? What is it? And then maybe, arguably, more people see it. What it was the intel agency's full-throated effort to prime the public that this was disinformation. So you have the 51 former intel agents saying, oh, hallmarks of Russian disinformation, even though many of them would still have connections to the FBI and be well aware that this laptop was accurate. And then even before that, you had the FBI priming these social media companies to not allow this story, to claim it was a Russia hack and leak and disinformation. What that means is, the impression that was given to the American public was this story is obviously BS, to the point where even social media companies have censored it. That's how bad it is. They didn't censor the allegations against Trump. They didn't censor the allegations against Kavanaugh. But this is so bad that they censored it. And so if you're just a normie that's not really looking in, you're like, oh, wow, 51 former intel agents say it's Russian disinformation, and it's being censored on these social media platforms. And then Joe Biden allows Joe Biden on the debate stage to go, that's debunked. That's debunked. All this is debunked. It wasn't. Now we know it's all true. We know it's true. Hunter's pleaded guilty. That's the real problem. That's what affected the election, and Democrats polled up to 1/3 of them said had they known that laptop was accurate, they wouldn't have voted for Biden, which would have been more than enough if that polling's accurate to make up for the 40,000 votes. And the Democrats don't care. Shocking internal notes from Microsoft employee from the day that New York Post story came out confirmed the FBI tipped Big Tech off about the Burisma story a week earlier. This is election interference, plain and simple. From Wednesday, October 14th, 2020, hack and leak. The FBI tipped all of us off last week that this Burisma story was likely to emerge, and today's call indicated that. So the FBI remained, they knew the laptop was real. They primed people for a month in social media, or for months, that a story about the Biden family and Burisma was coming out, and it was Russian disinformation, hacks, and leaks. And even up to a week before the story, the FBI was reaching out to Microsoft saying, oh, this Burisma story is going to come out. Next, Big Tech knew this work with the FBI would affect the 2020 election. In an internal chat, Facebook employees joked that when they get called to testify about why we influenced the 2020 election, they could say we've been meeting for years with the U.S. government to plan for it, which I already read. And Facebook's communications team didn't fear that the press would criticize them for censoring the true story in Biden's family influence. Why? As they joked about internally the night the story broke, the press is only as good as you are bad to Trump. I like it. Also, this thread's helpful. Golden rule, the press is only as good to you as you are bad to Trump. You see? Social media companies are now being pressured by the intel committees. They don't want to run afoul of the incoming Biden administration and the FBI. And they know the press won't have their back because the press is going to be all for them if they attack Trump. So they just went along to go along. Internal Facebook messages obtained by the judiciary and weaponization show that big tech employees knew that their trusted secret squirrel partners in the U.S. government would give them cover for censoring the story, even though they wouldn't be able to prove the laptop was hacked. Right on cue, just 5 days after the New York story was published, 51 former Intel community members, organized by Secretary Blinken, who's the secretary under Biden, and the Biden campaign lied to the American people, incorrectly calling the story Russian disinformation. Big Tech censored the most important story of the 2020 election because the FBI spent months priming them to. Today, Big Tech executives like Zuckerberg now admit that it was wrong to censor the story and put their finger at the FBI. But Big Tech knew better at the time. Even though the story was obviously not Russian disinformation, Big Tech continued to censor it because they knew that's what the Biden-Harris administration would want. As Facebook's senior leadership debated about censoring the New York Post story, Nick Clegg, VP of Global Affairs, explained why they had to continue to censor. Quote, our calls on this decision could color the way an incoming Biden administration views us almost more than anything else. Remember, Trump's the threat to the press. Remember? Trump's the threat to free speech. Here we have people at places like Facebook saying, well, shit, we have to keep going along and covering for the Biden administration on this, because if we don't, this could be the single issue that pisses them off about us more than anything. This was just the beginning of big tech censorship at the Biden-Harris administration behest. A few months later, Facebook, YouTube, Amazon began caving to the Biden-Harris White House pressure to censor American speech, including true information and jokes. Those two stories broke in the last 2 days. IRS whistleblower saying, we knew, the FBI knew, the IRS knew this laptop was real. We were told that we couldn't take investigative procedures because we didn't want to harm Biden's team for the election. We weren't allowed to look into the big guy. We knew the big guy was Joe Biden. We see that what Jack Smith's doing is the complete opposite of what we were told. We were told you can't do anything that could theoretically affect the election. Jack Smith's doing the exact opposite when it comes to going against Trump. We see that the IRS whistleblowers are being targeted. We see now that these tech companies are saying, yes, we were specifically told over and over by FBI agents who knew that this laptop was real, that this story about Burisma and the Biden family would be hacked or leaked, and it should be something that we should censor. We knew that they did so because they were afraid to piss off the Harris-Biden administration. And now we know a whistleblower from the FBI saying that the FBI way back in 2015 started a honeypot scheme with no predicate whatsoever to spy on the Trump campaign. All of that's broke in the last 2 days. And no one will give a shit. And I don't blame people 6 days before an election. The average person isn't going to look into this. But I look, and I'm concerned. So, there you go. Now I'm hearing reports Trump pulled up in a garbage truck. Awesome. Epic. Look, between me and you, Trump needs to not step on his own toes here and call Anything he says that remotely sounds like he's insulting Biden or Harris voters is going to be blown up massively by the media and Democrats at this point. So he needs to be out there like, yeah, the media scum, the FBI, whatever, all those groups he can criticize. But I understand people that vote for Harris, of course. I'm still going to be a great president for you. So JD Vance also supposed to be on Joe Rogan tonight. It should be a great show. So I hope you enjoyed the show this evening. I am going to leave now. I told my wife I'd be downstairs by 7, so I'm ahead of schedule, which is rare for me. Let's find someone to raid real quick. Why not? On Twitch. I hope you enjoyed. I know this is sort of my indulgence. Tomorrow's show, we won't talk about these things as much.
We just moved the side one.
But this is honestly as much the type of material that I like to go through. And I'm sorry that I don't do as much research like that as I used to. I used to love doing this sort of research, but now I'm busy. Oh! Your boy Wick. That's the only person I see on. Be nice to Wick. He's a nice guy. Even though if he's foolishly not voting for Trump, it's all right. So, remember, I got that 24-hour stream coming up. Tomorrow I should be streaming sometime between 6 and 8 p.m. I'll be putting shorts out and little videos out on YouTube therefore in. So I hope you enjoy all that stuff. Please give me a like and a subscription if you're on a platform that you can do that. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the donations that people give. I really do. I hope I didn't miss any today while I was reading all that stuff. I know this could be boring, but to me, this is the sort of stuff that's interesting that proves that my worldview has been correct all this time about this corruption. Thanks so much, everyone. I'll see you all tomorrow night. And as always, have a good one.
I do wonder, and I